The roar of the crowd was deafening, a cacophony of alien sounds that vibrated through every cell in Ethan's body. He stood on the raised platform in the center of the colossal arena, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a trapped bird desperate to escape. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, charged particles dancing across his skin as he tried to comprehend how he'd ended up here, in the final round of the Galactic Combat Tournament, facing down three of the most fearsome warriors from across the universe. His opponent to the left was a towering insectoid creature with chitinous armor glinting under the pulsating stadium lights, its multiple limbs twitching with anticipation. To his right, a gelatinous being floated several feet above the ground, its translucent form rippling with colors that seemed to shift with its emotions. Directly ahead, a reptilian warrior crouched low, scales catching the light in a mesmerizing display as it bared rows of razor-sharp teeth. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his grip on the energy staff they'd given him for this final battle. The weapon felt foreign in his grasp, its humming vibrations matching the erratic beat of his heart. He still couldn't believe he'd made it this far. Just 2 weeks ago, he'd been nothing more than a maintenance worker at the interstellar spaceport back on Earth, fixing faulty gravlifts and dreaming of adventures beyond his mundane existence. A sudden flash of movement caught his attention. The insectoid was circling to his left, its multiple eyes locked onto him with predatory focus. Ethan instinctively mirrored its movement, keeping all his opponents in view while maintaining distance from each. His mind raced through the combat techniques he'd picked up by watching previous matches, trying to remember which strategies had worked against these particular species. The gelatinous creature pulsed with an intense violet hue, signaling its intention to strike. Without thinking, Ethan dropped into a defensive stance he'd seen used by one of the tournament's early favorites. His muscles screamed in protest. They weren't accustomed to this level of physical exertion or the planet's slightly higher gravity. But something primal within him had taken over, driving him forward despite the odds stacked overwhelmingly against him. As the crowd's cheers intensified, Ethan realized with a start that they weren't just shouting for blood. Many of them were chanting his name. Or at least, what passed for his name in their various languages. It was surreal to think that this motley collection of beings from countless worlds had somehow chosen him, a simple human man, as their unexpected champion. The memory of how he'd entered the tournament flooded back in fragments. The mysterious invitation delivered to his quarters, the irresistible promise of credits and adventure, the moment he'd stepped through the portal and found himself in this alien world. Each recollection brought a fresh wave of disbelief, but there was no time to dwell on them now. The reptilian warrior had begun its advance, claws extended and ready to strike. Ethan tightened his grip on the staff, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. Somewhere in the stands, he thought he could make out the distinctive glow of the tournament officials, their ornate robes shimmering with patterns that seemed alive. Among them sat the most beautiful creature he'd ever seen, the grand champion of last year's tournament, her presence commanding even from a distance. She watched him with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat, though whether from admiration or mere curiosity, he couldn't tell. The insectoid lunged suddenly, breaking Ethan's reverie. He reacted purely on instinct, twisting his body to avoid the blow while swinging his staff in a wide arc. The movement wasn't perfect, far from it, but it connected solidly enough to buy him precious seconds. As he recovered his footing, Ethan realized with growing astonishment that he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting. Against all odds, he was holding his own against creatures that should have crushed him without effort. The realization gave him strength, fueling his movements with newfound determination. Perhaps this wasn't just some cosmic joke after all. Maybe, just maybe, he really did belong here in this arena, among these incredible beings. The thought sent a thrill through him that was equal parts terror and exhilaration, and as he prepared to face his next attacker, Ethan knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, his life would never be the same again. The initial shock of finding himself in the tournament had hit Ethan like a meteor strike during that first day. He remembered stumbling through the shimmering portal, his maintenance uniform still stained with grease from repairing a cargo ship's docking clamps. The transition from Earth's familiar environment to this alien world had been disorienting. The sky was a deep indigo instead of blue, and the air carried a faint metallic tang that made his nose itch. At first he'd thought it was all some elaborate prank. The floating registration desk, staffed by a being that looked like a cross between an octopus and a Christmas tree, had seemed too absurd to be real. But when the creature handed him a translator device and explained that he'd been selected as a wild card entry in the Galactic Combat Tournament, Ethan's skepticism had quickly turned to panic. He tried to explain that there must be some mistake, that he was just a regular guy who fixed things for a living, not a warrior or a fighter. But the alien had simply blinked its multiple eyes and informed him that the selection process was infallible. Those first few days had been a blur of confusion and fear. The other competitors had towered over him, literally and figuratively. There was Zarnak, a hulking brute with rock-like skin that seemed impervious to pain, and Tkala, whose crystalline body refracted light in dazzling patterns. Even the smallest participants, like the quicksilver-skinned Vril, possessed abilities that made Ethan feel pathetically human in comparison. During training sessions, he'd watched in awe as they demonstrated powers and skills that seemed ripped straight from science fiction novels. But the hardest part hadn't been the physical challenges, it was the isolation. Despite the translator device, communication remained difficult. Most competitors spoke in complex metaphors or used cultural references that completely baffled him. Meals became solitary affairs as he struggled to use utensils designed for tentacles or mandibles. The sleeping quarters, with their anti-gravity beds and temperature controls calibrated for species with radically different physiology, offered little comfort. Yet amidst the alienation, something remarkable began to happen. During one particularly grueling training session, when Ethan had fallen flat on his face attempting a basic combat role, several competitors had actually stopped to help him up. At first he'd thought it was pity, but then he noticed something else, a spark of recognition in their eyes. They saw themselves in him, remembered what it was like to be the underdog, the outsider. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, alliances began to form. The turning point came during the preliminary rounds. Ethan had faced off against a quadrupedal predator whose hunting instincts should have made short work of him. But instead of attacking, he'd done something no one expected. He'd started talking. Through the translator, he'd shared stories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs, of how his people had survived against impossible odds throughout history. The predator had paused, confused by this unprecedented tactic, and in that moment of hesitation, Ethan had found his opening. Word spread quickly through the tournament ranks about the human who fought with words as much as weapons. Competitors began seeking him out between matches, curious about this strange species from the third planet of Sol system. They wanted to know about Earth's oceans, its music, its art. In turn, they shared glimpses of their own worlds, the floating cities of Xylora 7, the crystalline forests of Varnath Prime, the eternal storms of Krylos. Through these exchanges, Ethan discovered that beneath their alien exteriors, these warriors shared many of the same hopes and fears as humans. They worried about their families, dreamed of peace, and wondered about their place in the vast universe. These connections became his strength, teaching him to read his opponent's intentions and adapt his fighting style accordingly. What he lacked in raw power, he compensated with creativity and understanding. The tournament organizers watched these developments with growing interest. Never before had a competitor managed to bridge such diverse cultures so effectively. Traditional rivalries began to soften as competitors shared strategies and techniques, creating hybrid fighting styles that incorporated elements from multiple species. Even the crowds, initially skeptical of the human's presence, started to embrace this new dynamic, their cheers becoming more enthusiastic with each passing match. As Ethan progressed through the rounds, he found himself changing in ways he never anticipated. His movements became more fluid, his reflexes sharper. He learned to anticipate attacks not just through observation, but through empathy, understanding what drives a being to fight, what makes them hesitate, what makes them press forward. The fear that had gripped him during those first days transformed into something else entirely, a profound respect for the diversity of life in the universe, and a determination to represent his species with honor. Through it all, one figure continued to watch him with particular interest. The reigning champion whose beauty transcended species and language barriers. Her presence at every match wasn't lost on Ethan, nor was the subtle way she nodded approval after particularly clever maneuvers. Their eyes would meet occasionally, and in those moments he felt a connection that needed no translation. It was as if she saw something in him that others missed, a potential that even he struggled to recognize in himself. The semi-final match proved to be Ethan's greatest challenge yet. His opponent was Kael'thar, a warrior from the volcanic planet Pyrones whose molten core allowed him to generate intense heat at will. The arena had been specially modified for their bout, a circular platform suspended over a pool of liquid magma, its surface radiating waves of oppressive heat that made Ethan's skin prickle uncomfortably. As they faced each other, Ethan could feel beads of sweat forming instantly, despite the cooling systems built into his protective suit. Kael'thar moved with deliberate slowness, his fiery body casting an eerie glow that illuminated the darkened stadium. The crowd hushed to an anticipatory silence, their collective breath held as they waited to see how the fragile human would fare against the elemental powerhouse. The first exchange came without warning. Kael'thar surged forward, his heated aura distorting the air around him. Ethan barely managed to dodge, feeling the searing heat singe the hairs on his arms as he rolled away. The platform shook with each of Kael'thar's thunderous steps, threatening to throw Ethan off balance. He realized quickly that direct confrontation would be suicide. He needed to outthink rather than overpower. Drawing on everything he'd learned from previous matches, Ethan began using the platform's unique properties to his advantage. He led Kael'thar in careful patterns, timing his movements to coincide with the natural vibrations of the magma below. Each step the Pyronian took sent ripples across the molten surface, creating miniature waves that Ethan used to maintain his distance while conserving energy. The crowd gasped as Ethan executed a daring maneuver, leaping between two rising magma geysers with perfect timing. The move wasn't just for show, it positioned him directly beneath Kael'thar's blind spot. Seizing the opportunity, he swung his staff in a wide arc, striking the precise point where Kael'thar's heat field met the cooler air. The resulting thermal shockwave forced the Pyronian to stagger back, momentarily disrupted. Sensing his chance, Ethan pressed his advantage. He recalled the story of David and Goliath that he'd shared with competitors earlier in the tournament, and how it had resonated with many of them. Channeling that same spirit, he focused on exploiting Kael'thar's single weakness, his inability to cool down quickly once overheated. Using his agility and the platform's unstable nature, Ethan danced around his opponent, forcing Kael'thar to expend more and more energy chasing him. The arena temperature climbed dangerously high as the battle intensified. Perspiration streamed down Ethan's face, his vision occasionally blurring from the heat waves. Yet he maintained his focus, remembering the breathing techniques taught to him by the amphibious contestants from Aquaria 3. Each inhale brought clarity, each exhale released tension, allowing him to stay present in the moment despite the inferno surrounding him. Kael'thar grew increasingly frustrated, his movements becoming less controlled as his internal temperature soared. Ethan could see cracks forming in the Pyronian's usually flawless heat shield, evidence that his strategy was working. Drawing upon the combined knowledge of dozens of species, he adapted his approach mid-fight, incorporating elements from various combat styles he'd witnessed throughout the tournament. A particularly devastating combination came when he merged the fluid movements of the Mercurians with the precise strikes favored by the crystalline warriors. The resulting attack shattered what remained of Kael'thar's defenses, sending shockwaves through the Pyronian's molten form. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the cavernous arena like rolling thunder. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Kael'thar was wounded but far from defeated. The Pyronian gathered himself for one final assault, his entire body glowing brighter than a star-going supernova. The heat became nearly unbearable, forcing Ethan to his knees. Through the haze of shimmering air, he could see the championship platform looming in the distance, its golden surface beckoning him forward. Summoning every ounce of strength and determination, Ethan rose to meet Kael'thar's charge. Time seemed to slow as they closed the distance between them, each step bringing them closer to victory or defeat. The outcome hung precariously in the balance, dependent not just on physical prowess but on the culmination of everything Ethan had learned during his improbable journey through the tournament. As the final moments of the semi-final match approached their crescendo, Ethan's world narrowed to a pinpoint of focus. Kael'thar's fiery form loomed larger with each passing second, the heat radiating from the Pyronian warrior threatening to overwhelm his senses. Yet in that critical instant, Ethan's mind cleared, recalling a crucial piece of information shared by the ice-dwelling Glacians during one of their training sessions. Extreme heat could sometimes be countered by redirecting its own energy. With a burst of inspiration born from desperation, Ethan shifted his stance, channeling the lessons of countless species into a single, calculated maneuver. He spun his staff in a complex pattern learned from the wind masters of Sirocco 9, generating a vortex that began drawing in the superheated air around them. The technique, originally designed to clear debris during maintenance work on Earth, took on new significance as Ethan poured every ounce of his concentration into maintaining the swirling current. Kael'thar's attack faltered as his own heat was pulled into the vortex, creating a feedback loop that destabilized his molten form. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the Pyronian warrior's brilliant glow dimmed, his movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Ethan pressed his advantage, weaving between the remaining heat waves with the grace of the aquatic dancers from Neptune's moons, their fluid motions now second nature to him. The The decisive moment came when Ethan combined the redirection technique with a strike inspired by the crystalline warriors. Timing his move perfectly with Kael'thar's compromised state, he delivered a precise blow that shattered the Pyronian's already weakened heat shield. The resulting explosion of energy sent shockwaves through the arena, forcing both combatants to their knees. For several heart-stopping seconds, neither moved, the outcome hanging in the balance. When the dust settled, Ethan found himself still conscious, though barely. His protective suit had saved him from the worst of the blast, but every nerve ending screamed in protest. Across from him, Kael'thar lay prone on the platform, his molten form slowly cooling and solidifying. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds, their cheers and roars shaking the very foundations of the arena. As the medical teams rushed to attend to both fighters, Ethan's gaze drifted upward to the championship platform. There, standing tall and radiant, was the Grand Champion herself. Her luminous form seemed to pulse with an inner light that eclipsed even the fading glow of the magma below. Through the haze of exhaustion and pain, their eyes met, and Ethan felt a surge of emotion that transcended language or species barriers. The tournament officials declared him the winner of the semi-final match, though the announcement barely registered through the fog of adrenaline and fatigue. As medics helped him to his feet, Ethan couldn't help but notice how the other competitors were watching him. Not with pity or amusement, but with genuine respect. Many of them had placed bets against him at the start of the tournament, yet now they nodded in acknowledgement of his achievement. What struck Ethan most profoundly was how his journey through the tournament had transformed not just him, but the entire competition itself. The once rigid boundaries between species had softened, replaced by a new understanding and appreciation for diversity. Techniques and strategies once guarded as sacred secrets were now freely shared among competitors, enriching the tournament's legacy far beyond its original purpose. As he was led to the recovery chambers, Ethan caught glimpses of the holographic displays showing highlights from his matches. Each victory had been hard-won, each strategy carefully crafted from the collective wisdom of dozens of species. The human who had entered the tournament as an accidental participant was leaving it fundamentally changed. Not just physically stronger, but richer in experience and perspective. In the quiet moments before his final preparations for the championship match, Ethan reflected on how far he'd come. From a maintenance worker fixing gravlifts to a warrior capable of defeating beings who should have been his superiors in every measurable way. Yet despite his achievements, he knew the true measure of his success wasn't in victories or accolades. It was in the bridges he'd built between worlds, the understanding he'd fostered, and the hope he'd inspired in beings across the galaxy. The championship platform awaited, its golden surface gleaming with promise. Beyond it stood the Grand Champion, her beauty a reflection of the strength and grace that had captivated Ethan from the moment he'd first seen her. As he prepared to face his final challenge, he understood that the tournament had become more than just a series of battles. It had become a testament to the power of unity in diversity, a celebration of what could be achieved when different species came together to learn from one another. And as the arena lights dimmed in preparation for the final match, Ethan felt a profound sense of belonging wash over him. No longer was he merely a human competing against aliens. He was a member of a greater community, bound together by shared experiences and mutual respect. Whatever happened in the coming battle, he knew he had already won something far more valuable than any trophy or title could offer. The final match began with an intensity that made Ethan's previous battles seem like mere warm-ups. His opponent, the reigning Grand Champion, moved with a fluid grace that defied physics, her body shimmering like liquid starlight as she circled him on the championship platform. The arena was silent now, the crowd holding its collective breath as they watched two beings from vastly different worlds prepare to clash in what would be the most anticipated fight in tournament history. Ethan tightened his grip on his staff, feeling its familiar hum against his palms. He knew this wasn't just another battle, it was a test of everything he'd learned, every lesson he'd absorbed from the countless species he'd encountered throughout the tournament. And yet, as he met the Grand Champion's gaze, he felt something else stirring within him: respect. Not fear or awe, but a deep admiration for the being before him, whose strength and beauty were matched only by her wisdom. She struck first, her movements so fast they blurred into streaks of light. Ethan barely managed to raise his staff in time to block her attack, the force of it sending vibrations rippling up his arms. He stumbled back, his boots skidding across the polished surface of the platform, but instead of pressing her advantage, she paused, tilting her head slightly as if studying him. It was then that Ethan noticed something remarkable. Her eyes weren't focused on his weapon or his stance. They were locked onto his face, searching for something deeper. Realization dawned on him. This wasn't just about combat prowess, it was about understanding. She wanted to see who he truly was beneath the armor of determination and skill he'd built over weeks of relentless training and fighting. Drawing a steadying breath, Ethan lowered his guard slightly, letting her see the vulnerability behind his resolve. For a moment, neither of them moved, the tension between them crackling like static electricity. Then, without warning, she lunged again, her strikes coming faster and more precise than before. But this time, Ethan didn't rely solely on physical reflexes. He tapped into the empathy that had carried him through the tournament, anticipating her moves not by watching her limbs but by sensing her intent. When she feinted left, he knew she was setting up for a sweeping strike from the right. When she leapt high into the air, he understood she was trying to unbalance him mentally, not physically. Their battle became a dance, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. Ethan incorporated techniques from every corner of the galaxy. The spinning kicks of the gravity-defying Zarnithians, the grounding stances of the granite-skinned Taurans, the unpredictable angles favored by the multi-limbed Zindari. But more than that, he fought with heart, with the stories, struggles, and dreams of all the beings who had shared their knowledge with him. Every strike told a story, every dodge carried the weight of connection. The crowd roared as the fight intensified, their cheers blending with the hum of energy weapons and the metallic clang of staffs meeting in midair. Sweat poured down Ethan's face, his muscles burning with exertion, but he pushed through the pain, driven by the realization that this moment wasn't just about winning, it was about proving that humanity had a place among the stars. That even the most ordinary person could rise to extraordinary heights when given the chance. The Grand Champion seemed to sense his shift in focus. Her attacks grew fiercer, almost desperate, as if she too recognized the significance of what was unfolding. She unleashed a flurry of blows that forced Ethan to retreat step by step toward the edge of the platform. Just when it seemed she might overpower him, he remembered a technique taught to him by the ethereal Lumini, a species known for their mastery of balance and harmony. With a sudden twist of his body, he redirected her momentum, using her own force against her. For the first time, the Grand Champion faltered. Her luminous form flickered briefly, her perfect composure cracking as she struggled to regain her footing. Ethan seized the opportunity, not to strike but to extend a hand, offering her support rather than dominance. The gesture stunned the audience into silence. Never in the history of the tournament had a competitor shown such restraint in the heat of battle. She hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing as she studied him. Then, slowly, deliberately, she took his hand. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy coursed through both of them, bright enough to illuminate the entire arena. The crowd gasped, unsure whether this was part of the fight or something entirely new. Neither competitor moved, their connection transcending the boundaries of species, language, and competition. In that instant, Ethan understood why she had been watching him so closely throughout the tournament. Like him, she had seen potential, not just in his abilities, but in his capacity to bridge divides and inspire unity. Her role as Grand Champion wasn't merely about being the strongest warrior, it was about embodying the ideals of cooperation and mutual growth that the tournament represented. And now, standing here on the precipice of victory, Ethan realized he had become a living embodiment of those same ideals. But the match wasn't over yet. As the energy between them subsided, the Grand Champion stepped back, resuming her fighting stance with renewed purpose. Ethan followed suit, knowing that while their connection had changed the dynamic of the battle, it hadn't ended it. If anything, it had raised the stakes. Now, the outcome wouldn't just determine a winner, it would define the future of the tournament and the relationships between all the species who participated. Their final exchange was unlike anything the arena had ever witnessed. Each strike was imbued with meaning, each parry a testament to the lessons they'd both learned. The line between combatants and allies blurred until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The crowd no longer cheered for either side. They simply watched, enraptured by the display of skill, respect, and shared purpose unfolding before them. As the clock ticked down to the final seconds, Ethan found himself locked in a stalemate with the Grand Champion, their weapons crossed in a deadlock neither seemed willing to break. Around them, the air shimmered with residual energy, the echoes of their fight lingering like ripples on a pond. For a brief, suspended moment, time itself seemed to pause, leaving the fate of the tournament hanging in the balance. When the buzzer finally sounded, signaling the end of the match, neither competitor moved. Both remained frozen in their final stance, breathing heavily as they processed what had just transpired. The judges' booth erupted in frantic discussion, their glowing forms flickering with uncertainty as they debated how to rule on such an unprecedented conclusion. Meanwhile, the audience sat in stunned silence, their usual cacophony of cheers replaced by an almost reverent hush. Ethan lowered his staff slowly, his chest heaving as adrenaline gave way to exhaustion. Across from him, the grand champion mirrored his motion, her radiant form dimming slightly as she straightened up. For the first time since the tournament began, Ethan saw something in her expression that went beyond confidence or authority. It was vulnerability, raw and unguarded. She looked at him not as an opponent but as an equal, someone who had earned her respect not through brute force, but through understanding and perseverance. Before the judges could announce a decision, the grand champion raised her hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the crowd. With deliberate steps, she approached Ethan, stopping just inches away. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated with a clarity that needed no translation device. "You have done what no other has achieved," she said, her words carrying a weight that transcended language. "You have shown us that strength is not measured in victories, but in the connections we forge." Her declaration sent a wave of emotion crashing over Ethan. He had come to this alien world as an outsider, a wild card entry thrust into a competition far beyond his comprehension. Yet here he stood, having earned not just the respect of his peers, but the acknowledgement of the most revered warrior in the galaxy. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes as he realized the magnitude of what he'd accomplished, not for himself but for humanity as a whole. The crowd erupted once more, their cheers now tinged with something deeper than excitement. From the stands, competitors who had once viewed Ethan with skepticism now rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the arena like thunder. Among them were faces he recognized, the insectoid warrior who had once towered over him, the gelatinous being whose colors now pulsed with approval, the reptilian fighter whose razor-sharp teeth were bared in what could only be described as a smile. They had all witnessed his journey and in doing so had become part of it themselves. Ethan's journey to the alien tournament had begun long before he'd stepped through that shimmering portal. Back on Earth, his life had been a patchwork of quiet desperation and unfulfilled dreams. Growing up in a small town where opportunities were as scarce as shooting stars, he'd spent his childhood staring at the night sky, imagining worlds beyond his own. His parents, practical people who valued stability over adventure, had encouraged him to pursue a real career, something reliable like engineering or medicine. But Ethan's heart had always been drawn to the mysteries of the cosmos. After high school, he enrolled in technical college, hoping to find a middle ground between his parents' expectations and his own aspirations. He graduated with a degree in mechanical maintenance, a skill set that seemed mundane but would eventually prove invaluable. 4 years he worked at the interstellar spaceport near his hometown, fixing gravlifts, repairing docking clamps, and ensuring that ships from across the galaxy could safely land and depart. It was a job that paid the bills but left little room for excitement, or hope. Yet even in the monotony of his daily routine, Ethan found ways to dream. The spaceport was a hub of activity, filled with travelers from distant planets, each carrying stories of their homelands. During breaks, he would sit on a maintenance platform overlooking the landing bays, listening to snippets of conversations translated into his earpiece. He learned about crystalline forests, floating cities, and eternal storms. These tales fueled his imagination, keeping alive the spark of wonder that refused to be extinguished. One fateful evening, as Ethan was finishing a late shift, something extraordinary happened. A courier drone delivered an envelope to his quarters, a simple, unmarked package that contained an invitation written in glowing script. "You have been selected as a wild-card entry in the Galactic Combat Tournament," it read. "Your participation is both an honor and a privilege." The message included coordinates and instructions to step through a portal that would appear at midnight. At first, Ethan thought it was a prank. Who would want him, a maintenance worker with no combat training, in an intergalactic tournament? But curiosity got the better of him. When midnight arrived, he found himself standing before a shimmering gateway that pulsed with energy. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through, and emerged in the alien world where his life would change forever. Now, standing beside the grand champion amidst the jubilant crowd, Ethan reflected on how far he'd come. From a boy gazing at the stars to a man who had fought among them, his journey felt like something out of a storybook. And yet, here he was, living proof that sometimes the universe conspired to make dreams come true. As the celebrations began to wind down, the tournament officials called for silence once more. The grand champion ascended a raised dais, her luminous form casting a soft glow over the arena. She turned to face Ethan, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Today," she announced, her voice resonating through the stadium, "we honor not just a champion but a pioneer. Someone who has shown us that strength lies not in power alone, but in the ability to bring others together. With that, she gestured toward a group of dignitaries seated in the VIP section. They rose as one, revealing a figure who had been hidden among them, a young alien woman whose beauty defied description. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, her eyes glowed with an inner light, and her presence commanded awe without effort. She was, as the whispers confirmed, the most beautiful being in the galaxy, a title earned not just for her physical appearance, but for her grace, intelligence, and compassion. The Grand Champion spoke again, her words carrying the weight of tradition. As per the ancient customs of our tournament, the victor shall receive not only glory but also companionship. This prize is reserved for those who exemplify the highest virtues of unity and courage. Today we bestow this honor upon you, Ethan of Earth. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as the alien woman stepped forward, her movements fluid and elegant. She stopped before him, bowing slightly in a gesture of respect. When she straightened, their eyes met, and Ethan felt a connection that transcended words. In that moment, he understood why she had been chosen, not merely as a reward, but as a partner who shared his vision of bridging worlds and fostering understanding. The crowd erupted in cheers, their applause echoing through the arena like rolling thunder. Competitors from every species surged forward, surrounding Ethan and his new companion in a sea of celebration. Tentacles wrapped around arms, crystalline bodies pressed against flesh, and voices of all pitches and tones blended into a symphony of joy. It was a moment unlike any other, one that would be remembered for generations to come. As the festivities continued, Ethan found himself reflecting on the significance of what had just transpired. The prize wasn't just about receiving the affection of a remarkable being, it was about forging a bond that would further unite the galaxy. Together, he and his companion would serve as ambassadors of peace and cooperation, traveling across star systems to inspire others with their story. In the days that followed, Ethan learned more about his companion, whose name translated roughly to Starlight Weaver. She hailed from a distant planet known for its artistic achievements and diplomatic prowess. Like him, she had been chosen not by chance but because of her unique qualities, her ability to see beauty in diversity, her talent for creating harmony where there was discord, and her unwavering belief in the potential of all beings to grow and connect. Their partnership quickly blossomed into something deeper. As they traveled together, sharing their experiences with audiences across the galaxy, they discovered that their differences complemented each other perfectly. Where Ethan's practicality grounded them, Starlight Weaver's creativity lifted them to new heights. Together, they became a symbol of what could be achieved when two souls embraced both their similarities and their contrasts. Back on Earth, news of Ethan's victory spread like wildfire. His small town, once dismissive of his dreams, now celebrated him as a hero. His parents, though initially skeptical, came to understand that their son's journey was not just about personal triumph. It was about representing humanity on a cosmic stage. They watched with pride as Ethan's story inspired countless others to reach for the stars, proving that anyone, no matter their background, could make a difference. Years later, as Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking a bustling alien city, he marveled at how much his life had changed. Beside him, Starlight Weaver rested her hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. Below them, beings from countless species moved about, their interactions marked by mutual respect and understanding. The galaxy had become a brighter, more connected place, and Ethan knew he had played a part in making it so. Turning to his companion, he smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "Do you ever wonder," he asked softly, "what might have happened if I hadn't stepped through that portal?" Starlight Weaver tilted her head, her luminous eyes twinkling with amusement. "I do not wonder," she replied, her voice melodic and sure. "For in every possible reality I believe we would have found each other. Our paths were destined to cross, not because of fate, but because of the choices we made, to embrace the unknown, to seek connection, and to believe in the power of unity." Ethan nodded, knowing she was right. Their story was one of countless possibilities, yet it was uniquely theirs, a testament to the idea that even the most ordinary lives could become extraordinary when guided by courage, empathy, and love. As they stood together, watching the stars twinkle in the vast expanse above, Ethan realized that his journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun.